After 19 years of loyalty, Ranger, a retired police K9, was dumped at a shelter like trash. His body was broken, his spirit shattered. But when grieving veterinarian Ellie Bennett looked into his clouded eyes, she saw something no one else did. The soul of a hero who still had one last mission left. To save her, the biting Montana wind howled through the cracks of the evergreen animal shelter, carrying with it the mournful chorus of abandoned dogs. In the farthest cage, tucked away where few visitors ventured, lay Ranger, a once magnificent German shepherd now reduced to a skeletal shadow of his former glory. His golden coat, which might have shimmered like autumn wheat in his prime, hung in dull, matted patches over protruding ribs. Clouded eyes that had once tracked suspects with laser focus now stared blankly at the concrete wall. 19 years of loyal service, first as a police K9 named Titan, then as a family pet, had ended with his owners walking away without a backward glance. Shelter worker Mia Carter paused by his cage, her breath visible in the cold air as she replaced his untouched water bowl. "He won't even lift his head for treats anymore," she murmured to Tom Reynolds, the shelter director. Tom's jaw tightened as he studied Ranger's listless form. "They said he was just an old dog when they surrendered him," he said bitterly. 19 damn years, and they couldn't be bothered to see him through his final days. A young couple passed by, cooing at puppies in the next row, their laughter sharp against the silence of Ranger's cage. The old dog didn't stir. He simply lay there, his shallow breaths fogging the cold metal bars as if he'd already accepted his fate. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans, because in that moment the shelter door creaked open, and Dr. Eleanor Bennett stepped inside, her boots tracking in snow and the weight of her own unspoken grief. Ellie hadn't planned to visit the shelter that day. The place held too many memories of Mark, her late husband, of weekends spent volunteering together, of his ridiculous habit of sneaking treats to the saddest-eyed dogs. But the emptiness of her house had become unbearable, and some unnameable pull had guided her here. She moved past rows of barking dogs, their paws scrabbling at kennel doors, until she reached the last cage. And there he was, an ancient German shepherd, curled into himself like a discarded rug. Unlike the other dogs, he didn't react to her presence, not a twitch of his ears, not a flicker of interest in his milky eyes. "That's Ranger," Tom said quietly, appearing beside her. "His family dumped him here 6 months ago, said he was too much trouble in his old age." Ellie's fingers tightened around the cage bars. 19 years. That was longer than some marriages lasted. She thought of Mark's last days, of how she'd clung to every second with him. How could anyone just walk away? Without thinking, she unlatched the cage door and knelt inside. The shelter staff held their breath. Ranger didn't lift his head, but when Ellie reached out, her trembling fingers brushing his matted fur, his nostrils flared, just slightly, just enough. "I'll take him," she heard herself say. Tom hesitated. "Ellie, he might not last the week. He's not eating, he's—" "Then he won't die alone," she interrupted, her voice raw. As she gathered Ranger's frail body into her arms, she felt the faintest tremor run through him. Or was it her own shaking hands? The drive home was silent, the only sound Ranger's labored breathing and the crunch of snow under tires. Ellie glanced in the rearview mirror at the dog lying motionless on the back seat. What have I gotten myself into? But deeper down, beneath the doubt, something else stirred. The first faint ember of hope. Ellie's farmhouse, usually too quiet, now felt unnaturally so as she carried Ranger inside. She'd prepared a nest of blankets by the fireplace, but the dog lay like a statue, his dull eyes fixed on nothing. She tried tempting him with warm chicken broth, the scent rich and savory, but he turned his face away. "Okay," she whispered, draping a quilt over him. "No rush." Exhaustion pulled at her, but she refused to leave him. She curled up on the couch, listening to the fire crackle and Ranger's uneven breaths. Somewhere in the night, a sound jerked her awake, a shuffling, scraping noise. Heart pounding, she sat up. Ranger was gone from his bed. She found him in the hallway, swaying on unsteady legs, his nose pointed at the framed photo of Mark in uniform. And then, a sound that shattered her, a low, broken whimper, the kind that came from a place deeper than pain. Ellie's throat closed up. Mark had been a K9 handler before they'd met. Was it possible? She edged closer, watching as Ranger's clouded eyes tracked the photo. His nostrils flared again as if she felt the faintest vibration. A growl. Number A tremor of recognition. Ellie sank to her knees beside him. "You knew someone like him, didn't you?" she whispered. Ranger didn't answer, but for the first time, he leaned into her touch, just slightly. The fire cast long shadows around them, two lost souls in a silent house, and in that moment, Ellie understood. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a reunion. The vet's words echoed in Ellie's mind as she drove through the snow-dusted pines. Severe arthritis, failing kidneys. He's in pain. But it was the way Ranger had looked at Mark's photo that haunted her. After days of phone calls, she stood on the porch of Colonel James Holloway, a retired K9 unit commander. The man's steel-gray eyes turned stormy when she said Ranger's name. "You have Titan," he rasped, using the dog's old call sign. Inside, over bitter coffee, Holloway unraveled the story. Ranger had been his partner for 8 years, a decorated narcotics dog with a nose that never failed. "He took a bullet for me in '09, Holloway said, knuckles whitening around his mug. When he was retired, Holloway's family had adopted him, but as the years passed and the dog slowed, the colonel couldn't bear to watch his hero fade. I thought the shelter would find him a soft landing," he admitted, voice breaking. Ellie's nails dug into her palms. "You left him to die alone." Holloway flinched. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees. Ellie stood abruptly. "He recognized my husband's photo. Mark was a handler. Were they ever stationed together?" Holloway's head snapped up. "Mark Bennett? From the 10th Precinct?" The world tilted. Ellie's breath came in short gasps as Holloway confirmed it. Titan and Mark had trained together briefly, which meant Ranger hadn't just been abandoned. He'd lost 2 partners in his lifetime. The drive home was a blur. When Ellie pushed open her door, Ranger lifted his head weakly. She knelt before him, tears spilling over. "I see you," she whispered, and for the first time his tail thumped once against the floor. The emergency vet's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Ellie clutched Ranger's limp paw. "He's crashing," Dr. Whitaker said grimly, adjusting the IV line. Ranger's breathing was shallow, his gums pale. The diagnosis was brutal: kidney failure, advanced arthritis, and now pneumonia. "You need to decide," the vet said gently, "if we keep fighting." Ellie stared at Ranger's sunken face. She thought of Holloway's cowardice, of Mark's unwavering loyalty, of the single tail wag that had felt like a miracle. "We fight," she rasped. The next weeks were agony. Ellie turned her living room into a makeshift ICU, administering subcutaneous fluids every 6 hours, blending meals into nutrient-rich slurries. Some nights she woke to Ranger's pained whimpers and carried him outside to relieve himself, his weight nothing in her arms. There were setbacks, days when he refused to eat, when his fever spiked, when Ellie sobbed into his fur, begging him to stay. But then a breakthrough. One evening, as she dozed beside him, something warm and rough dragged across her cheek. Ranger's tongue. Her eyes flew open to find his gaze clearer, his ears twitching at the sound of her laugh. He managed half a bowl of broth that night. The next morning he stood, shaking but determined, and took 3 steps toward the sunlight streaming through the window. Ellie caught him as he wobbled, her tears soaking into his scruff. "That's it, soldier," she whispered. "1 step at a time." Spring came softly, painting the Montana fields in wildflowers. Ellie sat on the porch steps, watching Ranger nose through the tall grass. His gait was still unsteady, his muzzle almost entirely gray now, but his eyes, once clouded with despair, shone with quiet contentment. He paused to sniff a dandelion, then ambled back to press against Ellie's knee. She scratched his favorite spot behind his ears, smiling as his tail thumped in rhythm. The changes had been gradual but profound. The day he'd balked at a trespassing squirrel, the first time he'd brought her his empty food bowl, the way he now followed her from room to room like a shadow. That morning she'd received a letter from Holloway, asking after Titan. Ellie had sent a photo in reply. Ranger sprawled in a sunbeam, his belly full, his paws twitching in sleep. No words were needed. Now, as the sunset painted the sky in gold and violet, Ellie leaned down to murmur in Ranger's ear, "You're home." And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, the old dog sighed, a deep, peaceful sound that seemed to say, Rest Sanctuary sign gleamed in the summer sun as Ellie led a tour of the newly built facility. Retired police dogs lounged in shaded paddocks, while volunteers distributed meds and belly rubs. Inside the main hall, a mural spanned one wall, a larger-than-life portrait of Ranger, his grizzled face wise and kind. Ellie paused beneath it, her hand resting on the headstone at its base. Ranger, Titan, brave heart, loyal soul. He'd lived 8 more months after that spring morning, months filled with steak treats, lazy naps, and children's laughter during sanctuary visits. When the end came, it was peaceful. Ranger had simply curled into Ellie's lap one evening, licked her wrist once, and closed his eyes. Now, as a young Malinois nudged her hand for attention, Ellie smiled through tears. "Your turn, buddy," she whispered. Somewhere beyond the Rainbow Bridge, she liked to imagine Ranger running pain-free through endless fields, with Mark throwing his favorite ball. And here on Earth, his legacy lived on, in every retired K9 who'd get to grow old, loved, in every person who heard his story and remembered. No hero should ever be left behind.